Within a Sports Central, we go over our next team prediction of this offseason, and this could be over the Kentucky Wildcats, a team that went 7-6 overall in the 2022 season. Not a bad season for Kentucky. But how this team be in 2023 and why I think this team could potentially be even better in the 2023 season is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. Once again, the record was 7-6, and this team started the season really strong. They were 4-0 through the month of September, beat Miami, Ohio 37-13, beat Florida on the road. Tough place to play, and got the win 26-16. Shut out Youngstown State, beat Northern Illinois, and then their first loss of the season came to Ole Miss. This was a loss 22-19 in a close competitive matchup against a solid team in Ole Miss. Lost South Carolina by 10 the next week, beat Mississippi State 27-17. So, I mean, this team was 5-2 to start out the season, but down the stretch, this team did take a couple of tough losses. I mean, the loss to Tennessee was just a brutal one. I mean, you consider Tennessee in October, though. I mean, Tennessee was far and away the best team in the country in the month of October. You considered their win over Alabama and the way that they beat Kentucky there. I mean, that was a hot team in Tennessee there. So lost that game 44-6. Beat Missouri the next week 21-17. Lost to Vanderbilt 24-21, which really that's not a game where you expect Kentucky to lose. I mean, Kentucky's definitely the more talented team there, but just a disappointing loss. But at least came back the next week, kept it close against Georgia. Took a loss there 16-6, only put up 6 points against that brutal Georgia defense. But on the bright side, it was somewhat of a competitive matchup as the Kentucky defense really showed up and kept it a close game. But took on Louisville to finish out the regular season. Nice win there, 26-13. So the record was 7-5 heading to the bowl season, and lost to Iowa in the Music City Bowl 21-0. So kind of a bumpy finish to the season here for Kentucky, but you consider Will Levis already took off the star quarterback of this team. It makes sense for this team to have lost the Music City Bowl in the way that they did. I mean, this offense just couldn't get anything going in that matchup, and plus the Iowa defense doesn't help that Iowa's defense was one of the best in the Big Ten last season. But overall, 7-6, not a bad season for Kentucky. But let's look forward to 2023 now. Your roster preview heading into the season. Obviously, Will Levis is gone. He's off to the NFL. So now it's up to Devin Leary, which is a huge land for Kentucky. Devin Leary, one of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal. You can expect him to have an immediate impact. I mean, he's got experience from NC State. He was an excellent quarterback there, and he actually led NC State to some great seasons. And so, I mean, NC State typically a team that doesn't have too much success. It was impressive what he did there. And so for Devin Leary coming in, he brings a lot of experience, and he definitely raises the upside of this offense. I mean, this offense, losing Chris Rodriguez obviously is tough. The backfield, a couple of losses. The receiving core looks great, though. Barry and Brown coming back, same with Dane Key and Tavion Robinson. So, I mean, overall, you consider this offense having Devin Leary in there now. I mean, if he was any other quarterback, honestly, it might be a tough season offensively, but Devin Leary really shows tremendous potential as a quarterback. And obviously the SEC is an adjustment from the ACC, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do with this offense. And he's got receivers to work with and everything, so I think the future is bright. But as far as it goes for the backfield, that is a bit of a questionable area. Obviously, Chris Rodriguez is gone. He put up nearly 1,000 yards last season, 6 touchdowns. He's had a huge impact for Kentucky the past few years. He's been one of the top rushers on the team for the past 4 seasons. So he's going to be gone, but at least you got McClain coming back, the second running back on this team. He put up nearly 400 yards last season. And then, of course, Smoke is also gone, the third running back on this team. So you lose your top and your third running backs. At least you got your second one coming back. Receiving core looks great. Quarterback situation is definitely good. I'd say offensively, this team definitely should improve heading into next season. Will Levis, of course. I mean, if you look at Will Levis's stats, 2,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 65% completion rate. I mean, he was not a dual threat quarterback. He is a pro-style quarterback. And so, I mean, if you look at his passing stats, I mean, your passing stats weigh a lot more when you're not a rushing quarterback. And Will Levis's stats offensively, his stat line was just not very good last season in comparison to a lot of quarterbacks. And I understand the potential and everything. I think in the NFL, he's going to have a lot of success with some time. But, I mean, with his time at Kentucky, and he wasn't always the most consistent quarterback. He turned over the ball quite a bit. And so that's something to keep in mind. And I think Devin Leary going in there. It's not going to make a huge difference going from Will Levis to Devin Leary, a quarterback that I think could be just as good or maybe even better than Will Levis was the past couple of seasons with Kentucky. So, I mean, I think Devin Leary is a great quarterback, and that's a huge land for the Wildcats there. Offensive line, you lose 2 on there. You also lose 1 on the D-line, 3 linebackers, and then 3 in the secondary. So defensively, you do lose a few in the secondary and the linebackers. Those aren't all starters. Those are your key players from last season. So a few defensive losses, but overall nothing too concerning. And it brings up the question, is this team potentially going to be even better in 2023? I mean, they were 7-6 last season. The bar isn't terribly high. I mean, the last few years, this team has definitely had some success. I mean, you consider their 10-win season in 2018, 8 wins in 2019, had a 10-win season in 2021. 2022 maybe was a bit of a disappointment if you consider the 7-6 record and some of the expectations, having, of course, Will Levis at the quarterback position. But I think the future is bright for this team. I mean, this team has kind of had a bumpy road over the years, with just missing bowl games and being one of the bottom teams in the SEC. But as far as the future goes with Mark Stoops, I really like this team, and I think this is going to be a contender in the SEC for many years to come if the past few years have said anything. But looking at the transfer portal and recruiting now, Devin Leary, of course, mentioned him coming in from NC State. Ray Davis is coming in from Vanderbilt. So you got likely your top running back coming in. I mean, he was a huge player, a key player to Vanderbilt, and so that's going to be a big land there, bringing him in. And so McClain is expected to still remain as the second running back on this team behind Ray Davis. But obviously we'll find more about that once we get to the season. Smoke off to Colorado, of course, in the receiver position. Chauncey Magwood is off to UCF. DeMarcus Harris in the transfer portal. Chris Lewis is off to Troy, and then Keaton Upshaw is off to Georgia Southern. So you lose 4 receivers here, but none of those 4 really had significant impacts. What really matters is that you bring back your top receivers from last season. And then Marquise Cox, offensive tackle, is coming in from Northern Illinois. Expect him to have immediate impact. Cortland Ford is coming in from USC as well. Goodwin is off to Florida. You got Tanner Bowles coming in from Alabama. Ben Christman coming in from Ohio State. So you do add a few to the offensive line, which is definitely what this team needs. Defensive lineman Justin Rogers is off to Auburn. You got Davern Rayner, linebacker, coming in from Northern Illinois. J.Q. Hardaway, expect him to have immediate impact. He's coming in from Cincinnati. And then Jansen Dunn is coming in from Ohio State. Recruiting-wise, 31st in the country, which 31st in the country isn't bad, but it is 12th in the SEC. So for the SEC standards, 31st is kind of low. You do have 7 4-stars coming in, 12 3-stars. So, I mean, the recruiting and the transfer portal aren't, I mean, at least you got Devin Leary coming in. That's obviously the most significant move. But overall, the recruiting could be better. But honestly, it's not too bad. You got 7 4-stars coming in, which definitely is a good thing, I would say. So on the future forecast meter, I got this team at an 8 out of 10. I think the future is bright. I really like where Kentucky's heading. I mean, the past few years, this team has been as good as they have been in a long time. And I think Mark Stoops, got to give him a ton of credit for what he has done with this team. So I think the future is bright for this team. I got them at an 8 out of 10 on the future forecast meter. But that said, let's take a look at the schedule now as we look forward to 2023. So you got Ball State week 1, Eastern Kentucky week 2, and then Akron week 3. So you got 3 easy non-conference games to start out the regular season, which I honestly think is for the better. I do think for a Kentucky team, Devin Leary, new quarterback, just to get warmed up before your big conference games, I do think that's a good thing to have 3 easy games to start out the season. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some teams that receive a lot of criticism for having 3 easy games like this at the start of the season. But I think for Kentucky, an SEC team like this, I definitely think is a good thing. And then you got Vanderbilt start your conference schedule on the road. So September, a very easy month, and you should be able to go 4-0. Then you got Florida home week 5, Georgia on the road, a big game there, and then Missouri at home after that. You got your bye week, and then Tennessee at home, Mississippi State on the road, Alabama home, South Carolina on the road, and then Louisville on the road to finish out the regular season. So definitely the second half of your season is going to be very challenging in comparison to the first half. I mean, the first half you got Georgia, which is far and away your toughest matchup, but the second half it's a lot of tough games. But looking at September, Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, all easy wins. You should win all 3 of those. And if you do lose to one of those teams, I'd definitely be concerned for you. And then Vanderbilt on the road in week 4, you do beat them. You lost to them last season, but that's just a team that Kentucky just doesn't have much business losing to, considering how talented this team is in comparison to the SEC bottom feeder in Vanderbilt. So you're 4-0 heading into the Florida matchup. You got Florida at home. It's a very winnable game here, but I do want to take Florida to win this one. I think Florida and Kentucky are very much on the same level, so having them at home, you might favor Kentucky, but I do think Florida is able to pull out this win here. You beat them last season, but I do think Florida goes in and gets a close win, steals a win off of Kentucky there to finish out September. And then Georgia on the road. This is a tough one here. Georgia, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if that team won their third straight national championship. They are so talented. They're just their depth is tremendous, and defensively they're brutal. I'm going to take Georgia there. I just think Kentucky's offense is just brutal trying to score on that Georgia defense, so I do think you lose there, especially with it being on the road. So you're 4-2 heading into the Missouri matchup. Even Missouri, I could see being a decent team in 2023. I wouldn't be surprised if they were in that 6-7 win range, maybe made it to a bowl game again. But I do think you beat them. You got them at home, so you beat Missouri. And then Tennessee coming up after your bye. This is a game where when I had my Tennessee prediction, a lot of Vols fans were confused about this one. How are we going to lose to Kentucky? But I think coming off of your bye, you're going to be rested up for this game. You got 2 weeks to prepare for it. You consider Tennessee's situation, though. I do have them taking a tough loss at Tuscaloosa against Alabama the week before their Kentucky matchup. So I think coming back off of a tough loss to Alabama, which I've got being their first loss of the season, I think coming back, having to play Kentucky the next week, I think Kentucky maybe sneaks up on Tennessee a bit and gets a nice win there. So that'd be a huge win on October 28th. You're 6-2 heading into November. November is a pretty tough month. I do think you lose to Mississippi State on the road. It's a winnable game, but I do think you lose there on the road. Alabama at home. I think you hang in there with Alabama, but I mean, you do have them at home, which is a good thing. But Crimson Tide, at that point in the season, in November, they should have their stuff together. It could be kind of a bumpy road, maybe the first month or two of the season for them, but once they get to November, they should be playing some pretty good ball. So I like Alabama in that one. And then South Carolina on the road, tough road game where South Carolina maybe steals a win off of Kentucky. So a couple of tough losses down the stretch for the Wildcats, but you beat Louisville on the road to finish out the regular season. So I got 7-5 for Kentucky. I think no matter what happens, Kentucky's either going to go 7-5 or 8-4. It's just a matter of who they lose to. But this is a talented enough team. I see them getting to a pretty decent bowl game. You're probably not going to be one of the top teams in the conference just because of a few of the question marks defensively, I'd say. I mean, offensively, there's a lot of potential. This team in general has got a lot of potential. I just don't know if talent-wise they've got the ceiling to be a major contender. And so looking at the range, your ceiling is 10-2. I think that's the best possible record you could have. Is 10-2. I think you lose to Georgia and probably Alabama for sure. So those are 2 losses, and if you win every game otherwise, there you go. But I got 7-5 for the prediction, which is kind of towards the lower end of my range. I do think 6-6 is your floor. That's the worst possible record you could have. But if you're asking me once again, I'd say 7 to 8 wins is very much, I'd say, where I got Kentucky. It's either going to be a 7 or 8 win season, kind of similar to where this team has been. Or was in 2022, but it's definitely an interesting team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on Kentucky, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.